so I'll go next. We bought our house 23 years ago as a new build in a development on an old potato farm. So we were the first family to own and live in the house. At first, everything seemed normal and we settled in pretty quickly. After the first few years though, some random, odd things started happening. Electronics would beep, the radio would turn on by itself, lights would go on and off randomly. So many little things like that started happening on occasion that I started writing things down in a notebook just to keep track of it all. For example, one night when everyone was in bed except for me, I was downstairs watching TV by myself. All of a sudden, the volume on the TV skyrocketed from where I had it at level 8 to level 52. So I thought I sat on the remote, or maybe the dog stepped on it or something, but the remote was on the coffee table in front of me. So I tried to turn the volume down with the remote, but it wouldn't work. Then I got up and I tried the buttons on the TV. That didn't work either. The TV wouldn't even turn off. So I had to get my husband out of bed to help me pull the TV away from the wall and unplug it to finally get it to stop. When we plugged it back in to see what the problem was, it was back at its original level 8 where I had it to begin with. So we couldn't figure that one out. We had the TV for another few years and never had that problem again. Then not too long after that, one day while I was home alone and my kids were at school, my husband was at work, I went to take the trash out. I got about 2 feet from the door where I was taking the garbage out, and right by my head, I heard this loud, low, gravelly groan. I didn't even know what chills down your spine meant until that moment, and I got chills from my head all the way down my spine and completely froze in my spot. It was so creepy. Then I thought, well, maybe I just stepped weird. I'm going to try to replicate it. So I was stepping on the wood floor thinking maybe that was it, but I couldn't repeat the sound. And especially, the creaking wood floor didn't make the same sound as the sound that was literally right by my head. So that freaked me out. After that, not too long after that, we started to remodel our basement and things really started to pick up. Things got weird. So if you want to hear more about that, give me a comment down below, follow, and I'll have more episodes because there's a lot more to talk about. So quick part 2 to our haunted house story. So not too long after the first part of the story, my youngest one, who was about probably maybe 7 or 8 years old at the time, went to bed one night and heard whispering by her head. She said she couldn't really tell what words were being said. She just heard whispering, and it freaked her out. So obviously she wasn't sleeping in her room that night. She came in and slept with us. Then about 2 weeks later, so this was November, so probably around Thanksgiving time, something similar happened to me. I was up in bed. It was about midnight. Hadn't actually gone to sleep yet. I was in bed for about a half an hour, still kind of laying there tossing and turning a little bit. I heard my husband open the baby gate at the bottom of the stairs. And as soon as I heard him open the baby gate, I heard a man and a woman's voice right by my head next to the bed, talking really loud. Not quite arguing, I wouldn't say, but talking back and forth almost at the same time as each other, kind of talking over each other. But it was in a language that I could not identify. Like usually I am pretty good about telling when a language is French or Russian or German. Like you kind of have an idea of what the language is. I had no idea what this language was. I just knew it was the sound of a man and a woman talking back and forth like they were having a conversation, but it was right by my head. And as soon as my husband got up to the top of the stairs and opened the bedroom door to come to bed, the voices stopped. I have no idea what that was. I still don't know what the language was, but it was creepy. Okay, so part 3. So where I left off, we had just started finishing the basement of our house. So one night, as the rest of us were all in bed, my husband turned off all the lights downstairs. He was getting ready to come upstairs and he thought that he heard music coming from the basement, which was under renovation, being finished. Thought maybe the contractors just left their stereo on, their boombox, whatever it was, for the night. So he went downstairs to try to check and see if he had to turn the radio off, but when he went downstairs, the radio was unplugged and there wasn't any music playing when he got down there. So we didn't know what that was about. That was the only experience that he had, but kind of made him think twice. And another thing that happened while the basement was under construction, I was home alone one day. The kids were all at school. My husband was at work. And at one point, I was walking through the kitchen, and from the kitchen, you can see my front door and the side lights. And I caught what looked like a man standing right outside the front door in one of the side lights. And I thought maybe it was one of the contractors coming in. Maybe they accidentally locked the door and couldn't get in, but they didn't ring the doorbell or anything. It was just a man standing at the door. So I went to the front door, and it looked like a guy with a white t-shirt and like work overalls or something, and a cap pulled down over his head, and he was kind of looking down. It looked like somebody was standing right outside the door. But when I went to the front door, opened the door to let whoever it was in, and there was nobody there. Stepped out of the door, went into the front yard just to see if somebody was there and had maybe walked away, and I just missed it. But there was nobody there. So again, a little freaky and something I just can't explain. So I want to continue on where I left off, which was the story with the man at my front door. So since then, when we started renovating our basement, things started to happen really often, like at least a couple times a week. We'd have things like toys turn on by themselves, things like the microwave would go off, the electric kettle in the kitchen turned on by itself a couple times, which the electric kettle has a lever that you have to push down for it to be turned on. So we also heard more voices, either whispering or sometimes even singing or humming. So a little weird stuff happening, but fairly frequently. One day I was home alone in the morning, cleaning up breakfast dishes, and was humming the Happy Birthday song. I got to the middle part after the first two happy birthdays and just stopped, and instantly heard what sounded like my daughter's recorder play the rest of it, the Dear So-and-so part, those 3 notes. Nobody else was home. No animals were upstairs, which is where her recorder was in her room. So I went upstairs to check and see if maybe it was by an air vent or something that would have blown air through it, but it wasn't. It was literally in the middle of her bedroom floor, so there was no way that air was blown through it. Another night, the same daughter came downstairs after she went to bed and said that she was scared because she saw a shadow figure rocking in a rocking chair out on the neighbor's yard right across from her bedroom windows. Of course, I went and I looked out the front door, I looked out her bedroom windows, and I didn't see anything. So settled her back down, got her back to bed, and then came back downstairs to where I had been in the family room. And I went to go over to the end table where I usually keep my handy dandy notebook, where I was taking all of my notes. But it wasn't on the end table, it had been moved to the coffee table instead. And I know I didn't put it there because it wasn't there when I went to check on her and get her up to bed. And then a couple weeks later, something similar happened. I was going upstairs to go to bed. And normally during the day, at the time we had a landline and we had cordless phones. And during the day, I would put it on the hallway table upstairs, just so I could easily grab it when I was going in between the kids' bedrooms. So I reminded myself that I had to put the phone back on the charger so it would be ready for the next day. So I went into my room, started to get ready for bed, brought my daughter from our bed back to her room, and then I came back out into the hall to grab the phone off the table, but it wasn't there. When I went back into my room, it was back on the charger, and it wasn't there. It had been on the hall table where I left it. Then another day, just to kind of add a little bit more in, I was sitting on the couch during the day watching TV while my kids were at school, and at the time we had one dog. She came and sat by my feet, looking from where we were sitting into my kitchen area, and she just sat and stared and growled. She didn't move from my side. She didn't check around to see if there was anybody outside. She just sat right by my feet and growled. And then about a year or two later, we had gotten a second dog, and the two of them did the same thing. The two of them came over to where I was sitting, sat down by my feet, and they stared in the same direction, and both were growling with their hackles up and everything. And they growled and didn't move for probably a good 5 or 10 minutes. Normally what they would do is they would go to the front door, they would look out the windows to see if there was somebody outside that they could see, but they didn't. This time they just sat right by my feet and stared and growled, something they had never done before. And they never did it again. They only did it those 2 times. I still don't know what that was, but that freaked me out more than anything, I think, because, you know, like if it's something I hear, I can kind of chalk it up to, well, maybe it's my imagination or maybe it's this. But when the dogs react to stuff, and it's stuff that I don't have an explanation for, I can't see it, I don't know. To me, that's just another level creepy. Okay, so quick story time for part 5 of my haunted house story. So picking up where I left off, so that basement renovations had started, a lot of activity had picked up. One day my daughter, my youngest daughter, who was about 7 at the time, 7 or 8, I think she was 7, told me that she started seeing this little girl. So a spirit of a little girl who was maybe around her age, maybe like 6 or 7. And they would start to play together, they would talk. And over time, my daughter told me that this girl would tell her about her history. So she said that her family used to live on this land long before it was developed, and our town was founded in something like 1752, like the middle of the 1700s, so it was before then. This little girl said that she lived with her family in kind of like a village or an encampment, and at some point the water in the area had dried up and food was scarce, so her parents and other members of their camp or group went out to try to find land that they could live on in another area, and left this little girl with her aunt and uncle. So they stayed behind here with the people that weren't either old enough or were too old to travel. But the little girl told my daughter that her parents never came back. So she was left with her aunt and uncle. And again, you know, such a sad story, but this little girl was left with her aunt and uncle, and eventually everybody in their village or camp that was left eventually got sick and died. So this little girl, who, by the way, said her name started with an M, but my daughter said it was something that she couldn't pronounce, so my daughter decided to call her Melanie, and the little girl said that she really liked the name Melanie, so she was okay with being called that. But this little girl was kind of stuck here because she was still waiting for her mom and dad to come back. So just really interesting that some of the details that she told were something that I feel like a 7 or 8 year old couldn't really make up. So I don't know, either my daughter is geniusly creative for 7 years old, or there's a little bit more to this story about this little girl named Melanie. But I thought that was interesting. I wanted to share it. Hey guys, so I wanted to add another update to my haunted house story. So we had some interesting experiences with knocks. We had a few of them, so I wanted to kind of just fill you in on those. There was one day, this was years ago, there was one day that I was home alone while the kids were at school, and I was sitting in my family room, and I started hearing this knocking kind of underneath the floor in front of my fireplace. And underneath the family room is just a basement crawl space, like not even room enough really for a human, but we had some stuff stored under there. But it was this like tapping, not regular, it was irregular, and and it was right over by the fireplace. It was just so weird. I didn't know what it was. Couldn't find an explanation for it. The fireplace is on an external wall. So I looked outside to see if there was maybe a bird or something, but it sounded like it was underneath the floor. Never really had an explanation for that one. But a couple weeks later, I was sitting in the kitchen with my 2 younger kids and one of the kids that I was babysitting at the time. And all of us heard 3 knocks that sounded like they were coming from the front door. My dog heard them even, and she went running to the front door barking like there was somebody at the front door. I thought maybe one of the other kids in the neighborhood was coming over before school, or one of the other kids I babysat was coming over, even though I wasn't expecting them. So I went to the front door to answer, and there was nobody there. Went outside, there was nobody walking away. I don't know, it was bizarre, but all of us heard it and all of us reacted. Then a couple of weeks later, my 2 younger kids and I were in our family room, and my oldest daughter was sitting at the kitchen table painting. Just the middle of the day, like probably late morning at that point in time. And we heard 3 knocks coming from what sounded like the kitchen where my daughter was sitting. So I asked her, the one that was sitting at the table painting, I asked her if that was her that knocked. She said it wasn't. Again, we all heard it. No source of the knocks, but we heard it. The dog heard it. Again, very strange. And then a couple of months later, my husband had a similar experience. So everybody else was in bed. He was downstairs, just like on his computer playing some games, and all of a sudden he heard what sounded like knocks coming from either the kitchen or the garage, because they're attached. And it sounded like shaving a haircut. Definitely not just random knocks. And he got up and he went to go look to see where the knocks were coming from. And again, he couldn't find any source of the knocks. There was nobody downstairs, nobody outside, nobody was in the garage. And again, he and the dog both heard it. So I have no explanation for these knocks. They didn't really continue after that. It was just those few incidents, but after that, we didn't really hear them again. So just strange, just more strangeness. So I wanted to tell you guys this update, something that my husband was telling me when we were on vacation. So I think in my last part I had talked about, or one of the first parts, I had talked about how my husband was coming up to bed one night and he went down in the basement because he heard some music. It happened again, probably in the same time frame when we were having our basement finished. I didn't remember this, but he was telling me that at one point he and I were sitting on the couch watching TV late at night. The kids were all in bed, and we both heard music playing. And it was actually, it was distinct enough that we could tell that it was Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. And it sounded to us when we were sitting in the living room like it was coming from the basement. So he got up and he went to go downstairs in the basement to see if he could figure out where the music was coming from. But when he went downstairs into the basement, he said it sounded like the music was upstairs. So he came back upstairs and it sounded like it was down in the basement. So he went down again, and all he said was that it sounded like it was maybe in the floorboards or something, because it didn't sound like it was upstairs when we were sitting upstairs, and it also didn't sound like it was in the basement when he was in the basement. So sorry, that's my cat. That's not some ghost in the background or some freaky noise, just my kitty. She's very loud. But anyway, just another weird random experience with music that had no source. It was bizarre. Anyway, just wanted to give you that quick update.
I don't scare very easily. In fact, it takes a lot to scare me, and I mean a lot. But the night before last, my wife and I were sitting out here on the porch. If you look right over my shoulder right there, they're getting ready to tear this place down. Now, we live in a trailer park. It's a decent trailer park, but this house has been here for a while. The people that used to live there, they've only been gone for maybe a month. They were very clean people, and they took very good care of their property. Now, for the last few nights, me and my wife has heard nothing but the same noise over and over. It sounds like animals in there, like a raccoon. They had a window air conditioner on one side there. When they took it, there was no window left. So they're getting ready to tear it down. We never thought anything of it, just thought maybe some kind of animal was in there. And that window right behind me, I heard a smack on the window, and I look over, my wife sees it, and I see it. There's someone standing in this window, and it doesn't look good to me. When they walked away, they tore those blinds off right there. That's why you see that hole. My wife and I jumped up. I tell her, go in there and call the police now. I go over to where the windows broke. Now, I'm not thinking anything devilish at this moment, right? I just walk over to the window. One reason being, I've got children in here, so whatever it is, can't be in there acting foolish with my children right next door. Sometimes you just wish you'd mind your own business. I opened that blind. Instantly, the blinds just turned to dust. And I know these blinds wasn't bad because the people that lived there took very good care of their home. For them to turn to dust, first I don't see anything, but I hear a scratching sound. It sounded like someone digging at wood. I turn in that direction and I see someone, and I know it's a person, just the eyes, plain as day. I could see someone's eyes, and I definitely seen a bridge of their nose. They were crawling on the floor towards me. Again, I'm not believing what I'm seeing. Whatever this is has to be human, and whatever this is acting like this cannot be in the home next to me. It can't happen. So I move away from the window because I don't know what it is and I don't want to take the chance. Just as I come past this window right here, I catch out the side of my eye someone's eye in the window. When I turned to look, it was almost like a jump scare. It got closer to the window, scared me. I took off running up the steps. Now we have a police department that's right there, 100 yards away. We can hear the cops coming. I told my wife, go back in the house. Whatever this is not cool. Something is not right. My wife doesn't believe this. She said, I'm going outside. The police are on their way. I want to see what's going on. When she comes out here, she sees the exact same thing I do. It scares her. She runs in the house. I'm right behind her. Whatever this was, it had eyes like a human, but this shit wasn't human. Police go inside. They look around everywhere. They don't find anything. In fact, one of the officers made it a point to show me that the dust in the house hasn't even been stepped on by anyone. Moved, nothing. And now I know there's something weird going on here. Really weird. We haven't heard a single noise since then. And I've been out here on the porch every night since. Next time I hear something, I'm going to record it. Next time I see something, you're going to see it. Make sure you guys like and follow.